Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Tim Donner, Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, Joe Schaefer. This is the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. We were shocked to hear that 3 U.S. soldiers were killed in an Iran-backed militia drone strike on an American military outpost on the Jordanian border with Syria. It was early morning on the 28th, Iraq time, when sound asleep in quarters, 3 American soldiers were violently killed, just following orders and causing no harm on an anti-Islamic State mission. Liberty Nation has continually and strongly reported that this could possibly happen. Just one missile or drone that could get through air defense. That's where our panelist, military affairs correspondent Dave Patterson, has been sounding the alarm about persistent attacks on the U.S. military base and outposts under Joe Biden. He's here to tell us what happened.
Well, Sarah, I think you're right on two accounts. First of all, after 158 attacks on U.S. service members in Syria and Iraq, it was just a matter of time before there was 159th that would kill Americans. That happened when an Iran-furnished drone used by the Islamic resistance in Iraq now, we find, made it through the Jordanian outpost air defense and killed, as you pointed out, 3 American patriots. Second, it's getting a little tiresome listening to the Biden talking heads, keep up with this mantra that it's a priority to keep U.S. personnel deployed in the region safe. Well, they failed miserably, and there are 3 flag-draped coffins to prove that. It's been said over and over, and you alluded to this, U.S. defense of our troops has to be effective 100% of the time, destroying 100% of the enemy attacks. The enemy only has to be successful once. It's time Biden decides to ensure that there is no enemy to be successful. It's time to make Iran, feel the pain of their behavior. Perhaps destroying the Iran shipbuilding and offshore industries complex in Bandar Abbas might be a good start.
Well, from the military perspective, I'm going to pivot over to Joe and see if he can give us an idea of if American people are agreeing so much with Dave or maybe with the Biden administration. Joe?
Well, it's clear the American people do not want to get involved in a war with Iran. Polling has shown that in recent years. Nothing has changed. In fact, with the calamity at the U.S. southern border, more than ever, the American people are not worrying about overseas friction. We've got enough problems here at home. The major concern I have is Joe Biden presented an aura of weakness abroad while still being committed abroad, put himself in this situation. And, he's running for re-election. He's got nothing to campaign on except for anti-Donald Trump. He's got to have something else. This could be something else. He had the coronavirus in 2020. We all thought, there's been a lot of speculation that he's going to be looking for some kind of distraction from his own very poor domestic record. This could be just what he wants, which of course is not what the American people wants. So it's him being weak in the first place, setting up a situation where now we can have an enormous distraction, get America involved in a war that the American people do not want. So his weakness leads to war, and the American people don't want to have anything to do with this, but it might be perfect for his campaign, which is terrifying to think about if you really, if you consider the consequences of that.
Well, Tim, it seems to me there's a whole, bunch of rhetoric on both sides of the aisle, and I might be wrong, and it might just be the conservative, the Republican side. But Biden's national security team is kind of not pulling it up. They're not doing what they need to do. They are just sitting back and kind of letting things happen, and that might be something that is my observation, and I'm not in the Beltway, but that seems to be a bipartisan kind of, complaint. How do you see that?
Well, of all the laughable claims that Joe Biden and his administration have made about this border, the most laughable was when Joe Biden said the other day that he's doing all he can. And everybody knows that to be a complete lie, that he could fix the problem if he chose to, but he chooses not to. He tries to say it's a matter of funding. It isn't a matter of funding, it's a matter of policy. And in terms of the conflict in the Middle East, the administration keeps saying that they're not responding because they don't want a broader war and they don't want a war with Iran. Agreed. That's what the American people say. But what they get 180 degrees wrong is that by showing weakness and an ability to, and a predilection to just essentially ignore over 160 attacks on U.S. bases in the Middle East, he's actually promoting the likelihood of war. You don't avoid war through weakness. You avoid it through strength. Ronald Reagan practically eviscerated the Iranian Navy during his administration, and we didn't hear anything from Iran for a long time. Donald Trump went in and killed Soleimani and Iran after one strike, just so they could show they're responding. They were put back in their box until Joe Biden came around, and his weakness started by saying he was basically desperate for another deal with Iran, the kind that Obama had made and that Trump canceled. And so what does he get for giving Iran everything they want? He gets them to start bombing American bases. This is quite a policy, and it's one of several that's a killer for Joe Biden in this election season.
Well, we've kind of been known for over the centuries of arming our enemies. Eventually, we arm the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. And so, if we arm these other people to take other people out, then they turn it back on us. And I don't see any kind of
Osama bin Laden was the best example of that. We funded him to take on the Russians and the Soviets in Afghanistan. And then, of course, he turned around and used his own equipment and resources against us on 9/11.
Yeah, and I don't get it, because there cannot be any profit in it for us. And of course, I don't understand all this stuff. I'm not some, war strategist. I'm not Dave. But there cannot be any reason for us to do that. And I kind of want to know, if we do ignore this, and there must be, because you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. So if we ignore this and there is escalation in the Middle East, what is that going to cause us financially? I mean, besides loss of lives, and I know that that's our top priority, but financially, is that going to be devastating to us or them, Andrew?
Yeah, I'll get to that. But just one moment though. Yeah, it's funny. The other day I was reading a memo from Donald Rumsfeld that he wrote in the 1980s, and he was talking about the very same thing that Sarah mentioned, that perhaps the U.S. shouldn't be meddling so much in the Middle East because the U.S. intelligence agencies and the U.S. government doesn't really understand the politics that occurs in that region. Now, economically, the main thing, of course, if there's a wider conflict in the region, the main consequence would be higher oil prices. And this is one of the main reasons why perhaps Joe Biden is so reluctant to even blame Iran for everything that's been going on lately, because it would potentially disrupt output and supply in the region, result in sanctions. Because you look at some of the numbers, Iran production and supplying a lot of these countries in the area, it's returned to 2018 levels. So you remove that one area from the global energy markets, you're going to have higher oil prices. So far this year alone, oil prices have risen about 10%. And this is a response to two things: the escalation of the potential escalation with Iran, and what's been going on in the Red Sea. In the Red Sea, it's not so much production, it's more the fact that there could be transportation disruptions and delays in both energy products and consumer goods. So Biden is probably so hesitant of trying to escalate this thing or blame Iran for anything, because then that would lead to higher inflationary effects, which he doesn't want heading into his reelection campaign, of course.
I mean, he's just letting the fox in the hen house. He's just letting them in and taking little bits and pieces, and that seems to me that it would make them more confident that they can take on, the U.S. government.
I mean, that is so transparent how everybody can see it. Everybody can see Biden's weakness. The whole world can see Biden's weakness. They can see the fact that he's a coward because he thinks that by appeasing Iran with his Neville Chamberlain strategy, that he's going to avoid a war. But you know what? Iran wants a war with the U.S. a lot less than the U.S. would have any desire to go to war with Iran. Iran is desperate to avoid a direct conflict with the United States. And you have to take that into account when you punish them for attacking U.S. bases and killing U.S. servicemen. Would you agree with that, Dave?
I think that you're right about Iran's reluctance to engage us militarily, but Iran was reluctant in 1988 to do the same thing, but yet their behavior was laying mines in the Persian Gulf and eventually damaging one of the U.S. Navy ships. And the consequence of that was, as you pointed out, we sank half their Navy and they became quiet. In any conflict, you always have to remember that as whatever your desires are regarding an enemy, they have a vote. And so far, Iran has voted 160 or more times. So whether the administration wants to admit that there's an escalation of the conflict, there is an escalation of the conflict, and it was brought to us by the enemy.
To Tim's point, there's one country that doesn't necessarily want a broader conflict in the region. That's China. China recently spoke to the Iranian regime and said, to knock it off in the Red Sea because they're so concerned that they won't be able to ship their goods over to Europe or North America. So they're scared of a wider conflict because that would also lead to higher energy costs. Because you look at some of the import data coming out of China, and they're buying a lot of crude oil. Of course, not just from Russia, but other major trading partners outside of their region. So that's something that China may not want exactly.
There's another point that should be made here, which is that, during the Trump years, we became energy independent.
Mhm.
And when Joe Biden came in and basically demonized fossil fuels, what happened is that we suddenly were no longer energy independent. But you think about it, the point of energy independence is so you don't have to get involved in engagements in the Middle East, which has always been and will always be a quagmire. It's never going to get settled with peace and prosperity for everybody.
I don't understand how any government can think they can go in there and discuss, peace when they don't want it. That's not their end goal. Their end goal is
to destroy every Jew
anything that's not what they do.
Destroy Israel, and from the river to the sea, make it fully Palestinian, fully Arab. They say any Jew they can find, they will kill. That is essentially the Hamas mission in life.
Tim, that's the backdrop. That all of this conflict is played out in front of. And we always have to remind ourselves that that's actually what's going on. And so everything that takes place on the front of the stage, we actually can, I think, manage. The fact that Biden doesn't do that is the real problem. And that he doesn't take the initiative to drive the course of actions, both in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. Pick your favorite place in the Mediterranean region. And the United States simply does not exercise the cachet that we could if we had a president.
Can I interject here? Because I think if you say energy independence, you should immediately say Andrew, because that's my area. Anyway, first,
I'm sorry I didn't direct the comment right at you, Andrew.
Sorry, Sir Andrew.
Well, okay, so two things.
Our bad.
Two things on this front. First, crude oil production is actually at an all-time high of 13.3 million barrels per day. So give credit under Biden that despite all of his terrible policies, the oil industry is responding and they're still producing huge amounts of oil. Two,
True.
the concern you have right now though is that his export ban on export project applications for liquefied natural gas. This is something that the rest of the world should be concerned about, because if he's restricting LNG exports to the rest of the world, then a lot of countries are going to turn to other major natural gas producers, namely Russia, and that's something that a lot of U.S. energy producers have warned about. So, when I think I spoke to this one executive, and he was saying how this is a win for Russia because now everyone's going to go back to Russia, and it's a loss for all of America's allies. So that's another thing that he's really threatening the global international community with.
I know you guys can go for hours and hours and hours on this subject, but we're going to have to wrap it up. So, from the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan to the loss of more American lives, the hands of our enemies, some might think this isn't a big priority for this administration. Thanks for watching. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for Free Thinking, Free Speech, LibertyNation.com.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at LibertyNation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are LibertyNation.com.